Thank you guys for coming today. We are some of the tutors from the Writing Center. We're going to be discussing different citation styles with you today. Just so you can get kind of a feel for the room, what is the citation style that you are probably the most familiar with? Out of APA, MLA, and Chicago Turabian?
Probably APA.
MLA.
MLA? Okay. So then we'll go over the two that are least known in the rooms of Chicago Turabian and MLA, and then we'll go with APA last in case we run out of time. So first we'll go with Chicago Turabian. Chris, if you want to help me out here.
Sure, we've got some handouts for you guys to look at and follow along.
Here we go.
Will the handouts be available on your website?
They should be very soon.
Okay.
Occasionally we have a few difficulties updating our website because there's a couple different departments working together. But we're going to try to figure out a way to put them on our Facebook and things like that. That way we have control of trying to get them out there to people.
Would it be, would you be okay with me letting faculty know when that's available so that they can refer to it?
Absolutely.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so with Chicago Turabian, it's mostly used in the humanities and the arts, and occasionally it's used in the social side or the physical, natural, and social sciences as well. With the basic formatting, it's going to be pretty much the basic formatting that you're going to see across the board. So Times New Roman, 12-point font. The only difference is in Chicago Turabian, we also use footnotes. And with those footnotes, there'll be a 10-point font and they'll also be single-spaced. So that way they take up less room at the bottom of your paper. It uses a bibliography, but with almost every citation style, it's going to be called different things, but it's pretty much the same thing. So whether you're normally used to a works cited or references, a bibliography will be pretty much the same thing. The citations will still be in alphabetical order, and they won't be arranged as they appear because your footnotes will be numbered at the bottom of the page. So it might be your instinct to list them as they're numbered, but you won't. You'll do them in alphabetical order. You'll also single space individual citations and double space in between them. And then there's actually two different ways to work with Chicago Turabian. There's the notes bibliography style and then there's the author date style, but notes bibliography is much more common, and so it's the one you're going to see a lot more. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the author date style, it looks a lot like APA. And it's used more like in the natural sciences, like if it were a chemistry paper or something like that, that's where you would encounter that. For most humanities, you can see the footnote style.
And also, for Chicago Turabian, there are really two manuals. This lead is coming up. If you ever want to do a paper in this style and you need a manual, we prefer the Turabian manual. It's written more for writers, where this one is written more for publishers. And this one is much easier to understand because Kate Turabian, who worked in the Chicago office, pretty much said, why isn't there an easier way to do these citations? Why isn't it simpler? And so she made an easier manual to read and to find things in. And also that one has both of the citation styles in it, so you won't be lacking in one of them if you need them. Okay, as you can see here, those of you who are familiar with MLA, Turabian is not that far off. So through the rest of the PowerPoint, we've kind of given you examples of what what your citations should look like. So I'm gonna break the TV. Whenever there are footnotes, you'll have the numbers in front of them. We've given you the example of 1 in front of every one of them, but they'll be noted how they appear. And then also, these are going to be the ones in your bibliography. So it's almost the same, but the main difference is whenever you have the footnotes, it will always be first name and then last name. So it's a little backwards from what we're used to. And then everything will be separated by commas. As Chris explains, it's kind of like a sentence. So it's just one sentence at the bottom, and it all kind of runs together until you get to your period at the end. So it's just one idea. But then on your bibliography, you'll have an idea, so you'll have the author as an idea, and then the book, and then the publisher, and the year. And so you'll actually break it up with periods at that point. And then, again, with your normal authors, normally we're used to doing the first one backwards and then some styles, the second one forwards. But they'll all be forward until you get to the bibliography, and then you'll do it backward and then forward. Okay?
Now, if you were adding a note, something that you wanted, as not the main part of the text, but just, an additional bit
A
of
discursive
information.
footnote.
Right.
Yeah.
So would you go with the citation first and then your note afterwards in that footnote format? How would that look?
That's a composite, like that would be a composite footnote. And you can do that even with multiple citations. Like you can do a universal citation for the paragraph. So you just have your footnote at the end of the paragraph, and then you list your citations as they've come in the paragraph in order. The discursive footnote would come first before the citation in that case. So. And just to add to that, the reason that the footnote is different is because you read it like it's part of the text, like in the example of a discursive footnote. So you want it to flow more like a sentence. And if you look at the bottom of the first page of the handout, there's an example footnote, and it's got the paragraph style indentation rather than the hanging indentation that you see on a bibliography, just because it's more like a part of the text. So you want to punctuate it like part of the text.
So the footnote should have that indentation? Okay.
That's right.
Also, we're going to be teaching you the very basics of every kind of citation style, so if you do have a question, feel free to just shout out or raise your hand and we'll answer it as we go.
I am curious, do you all get a lot of students over in the Writing Center that need to use this style?
Actually, we have quite a few right now. We have a group of Korean students who are working on art projects, and their professor has specified that they want it in Chicago Turabian, and so they're working with it right now, but the professor isn't familiar, so we're teaching them as well, so it's been quite a struggle. But the history department, we do have quite a few students come over from the history department, as people with their dissertations or with their theses coming in who use this as well.
Okay, cool.
Alright, so next slide please. Okay, and then with journal articles, there's a difference in whether you find the article in print or in an online database. The only real difference is that you're going to include the DOI as well. And then, maybe I'm crazy, I thought we included...
Wasn't that in the
database
APA that you inserted the DOI?
APA does as well.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the citation styles, you'll see some repeating characteristics. They're not too far away from each other. That's why the ones that I know the best are MLA and Chicago Turabian, because there's not a big difference in the way that you cite things.
I do have a question, and you might be getting to this. I'm frequently running into reading things on my Kindle that do not have page numbers, that have location numbers. Is that in some of the guides now?
No.
There is an ebook. One, or here you go. I'll give it to you. You know the book better than I do. Whenever you go on to things, my favorite site anyways, to go to for most of these is Purdue Owl, but if I go for Chicago Turabian, there's actually a Turabian site, and I believe it has an ebook on there. We included the most common sources on these slides, and I haven't run into an ebook situation yet, but Chris can find it and then we can get back to you. Will that be alright?
No, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. So like I said, they're pretty much the same, and then again, the commas and the periods depending on where the citation is. Next slide please, Caitlin. Okay, websites. We're seeing more and more websites being used, despite our professors constantly telling us that websites are the devil. So we thought we should include those as well. You're going to have the date last modified if it's available. I know some websites don't have those, or students tend to go to the websites that probably aren't the best and don't have those anywhere on them or an author. And like this one, if it doesn't have an author, you'll just skip and go straight to the name of the article that you're looking at, and then you'll also include the URL. I know in some citation styles, including the URL is kind of going out of style, but you'll still do it in Turabian. And then videos are becoming a really popular thing, especially with the English 1301 and 1302 students doing their projects. And so we've included ways to cite these as well. And so you'll do all the information like you would normally do for any other thing. The author or the video creator, if they don't have their actual name, you can also include their screen name. So with these, if you ever have your students do videos, you might want to make sure that the videos that they're looking at are appropriate, or else you might get some really weird screen names coming into your essays. That's just going to be something that you'll have to decide. and then it'll be the name of the video, where it was found, the data was accessed in case it was changed or in case it gets pulled off the internet, and then the URL as well.
Haley, I
Yes.
just have a really basic question about the website citation. As we know, sometimes website URLs can be
Are
5
super
miles long. So how do you decide what the route is and what you should cite in there?
I have always been told that you do the entire URL because if someone wants to find the exact article that you found, they should be able to type in or to copy and paste exactly what you put and be pulled up on that page. And instead, if you do a route, they're going to have to go to that page and then find it. It's the same with a DOI. A DOI could be completely long, but you would hate to shorten it and get it wrong.
Now, what is the, I'm sorry, go ahead. I've been asking.
I actually have 2 questions.
Okay.
One is there a rule about the URL being hyperlinked or not?
Mm.
Because I'm seeing the 2, and so I didn't know like what is the.
If there's a rule, I'm not sure if there's a rule about it being hyperlinked. Honestly, it's like that because I didn't notice it.
Okay.
I didn't know if it was like a no-no or if it's acceptable. You know, a lot of times if you're going to post it online,
Yeah.
Mhm.
it
Then you
reads
can
like a
just click
blog
into it.
and you just click through it, but that might not be acceptable.
I think when you're trying something out online, especially as a student, it helps to have it as a hyperlink because the professor can just click it and go.
Mhm.
However, I think if it's being printed, it might be best to just keep it as text.
That way it appears
Yeah.
black and white like the rest of your paper.
Well, I've also seen hyperlinks where they can undo the underline, so it's still hyperlinked, but it doesn't have that line that makes
So
it
the
hard to
formatting
read.
is different.
Yes, that's why I'm just wondering about that, because there's a lot of iffy things that I've heard about with that.
I'll usually do that, and I think the rule with hyperlinks is that at this point in most manuals, there aren't hard and fast rules because at the time that the manuals came out,
Mhm.
internet research was still being developed. I think in the next editions, we'll start to see more of must be the same text as the rest, or it must be blue text with an underline.
Right.
I, as a general rule, regardless whether I'm printing it or not, will turn it black and take out the underline, but leave the hyperlink. So the professor can click on it if they need to, but it looks like the rest of the paper.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I tend to just remove the hyperlink because I found out over the last 2 weeks that I know nothing about Word. And so if you don't know, she's taught me so much that I didn't know existed. Like there was an alphabetized button. I didn't know that. And so if you...
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can show you where it is. I'm just saying we're making a Word handout for people like us.
Right.
Because Caitlin is a wizard at Word. But I tend to just remove the hyperlink and it's never been an issue.
Okay.
So that way, in case you don't know.
I had a question about the access date.
Okay.
Let's just say that I was developing a literature review, and sometimes that can take anywhere between a month to like even a year. So when do I record that access date? Is it the first time I looked at it, or
The most
Yeah.
recent, the most recent time you've accessed it.
okay? What if that was like it? Does it
The day
matter?
before you turn it in.
Well, no. I was just wondering if it matters, like
That's
if it was like
incriminating.
so long ago. Like, what if I only accessed it like several edits ago?
It doesn't matter. When you looked at it, it just says, on this day, this was here, and I looked at it. That way, in case it does get pulled off the internet, or in case the content is edited, you can say, well, on this day, this is how it appeared.
Okay, so there's no writer's responsibility to make sure that it's the most current edit on the website. That do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
No, the access date is mostly to show because there are ways with the internet that you can take it back to whatever date that was. So if the person who's reading your paper is concerned about any kind of legitimacy because the website's no different, they can do that to look at what you saw.
And decent websites, when they do an update, they list at the bottom when that update was made and what was changed. Not all websites do that, but CNN does that a lot. I did have a question about her question about gigantic URLs. Is there a policy process against using tiny URL and pointing professors that way?
That's a really good
Tiny
question.
URL.
So you can go and basically create a tiny URL that will take one of those gigantic ones and squeeze it down to something that's much more
So it's
manageable.
kind of like a roadmap for how to get there, but it's a condensed
Yes.
URL.
It's basically a redirect is what it
Uh-huh.
sounds like. So I was kind of curious about that.
That may be more recent than this edition, because I'm looking at the URL section, it doesn't mention that.
Okay.
And this is from, I think, 2010. And it says regarding URL to replicate it exactly as it is.
Okay.
And it doesn't say to leave it active, but it implies that you should, because it says to replicate it exactly, all capital additions, and don't break the lines if you have to. So.
Okay.
And can we get back to the Kindle real quick?
Yes.
If there's no page number, you cite by like the name section, so like either the chapter or the subheading, and that might be enough. If you want to be extra careful, you go down to the line number, so you literally count the lines of text and cite that. Wow. But
Okay.
a different, like I've never had a professor that made us go down to the line number. If you're publishing, then maybe they will.
Well, especially because the font, you can make it smaller or larger on a Kindle. So on someone else's view, that line number may not be correct.
Well, I've noticed that the location numbers seem to be fluid as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
sure.
it'll give you an approximation of where that occurs, but
Well, like,
it's
and
not.
on,
It isn't. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and on, because I have a Nook, and on my Nook, it will, since the pages appear smaller, it'll be like page 95, page 95, page 96. So mine will double to meet the actual pages, but it doesn't match up to the ebook, if that makes sense.
And so usually the best way is to chapter and subheading as specifically as you can get, just to know what section the text is in.
Or just stop using ebooks altogether.
Yeah,
Or you
usually
just
what I do is I find the
Find the print version.
Oh, wow.
And you can go to Google Books, and search that text, and it'll give you an actual page number.
Oftentimes,
Sometimes it's
Yikes, 5
yeah.
hours later.
Yeah.
But so you mean parenthetically, Chris, you do chapter number, section number, and then just get a specific.
Sure,
if you
and
can.
if you guys want to pass this around and look, this is a section on electronic books.
Oh, cool.
And there's different examples. So if it's a PDF book, PDF books usually have a stable URL,
Right.
but
Right.
so for here, Kindle.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not, and I don't know what I don't know what the determination is for some Kindle books will actually have the actual page number.
Mhm.
Some will not. I don't know who decides that.
I think it's just
That-
the publisher.
Yeah, that has to
Probably
do
so.
with the formatting whenever they upload it. 'Cause I've done online publishing
Okay.
before, and for like the self-published people, it's not even worth it to try to do the page numbers.
Oh.
It really isn't, but if it's published through a big publishing house,
Right.
oftentimes it will.
Sure, it's a cost
Because they just
consideration at some level.
throw the text in.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you speak about the DOI, because I'm not familiar with that actually.
Document
Which is
object
probably
Digital
really
object
sad.
identifier.
And
Okay.
how would I find it? Where do I get that
You just
number?
know. You just-
ID?
All right. I am one of those really bad people, and I should not be an example here, but I just pretend like I found it in print. So who is more familiar with DOIs?
DOIs, I usually find them through the database. If it doesn't actually have it listed in the database, if you go into the PDF version, oftentimes it'll be like on the bottom right-hand corner of the PDF.
And sometimes, if it's an online file, they'll have it in the metadata that's like hidden, but you can get to it if you like right-click on the file and go to properties. I think it's like document object identifier.
Identifier.
Digital object
Digital, thank
identifier.
you.
And why did they start using these? Does anybody know?
I think the libraries have been using them for a long time. But
Yeah, and I just ran into it in the manual. It says it's more stable than URL a lot of times.
Okay.
So.
Uh-huh, okay.
Actually, before working in the Writing Center, I didn't even know a DOI existed, and that's why I got in a really bad habit of not citing it like I should. But also, a lot of professors, I feel like, understand that we use the databases, and they just assume all the journal articles that we come across come from there. But then again, professors are going to be a lot more lenient than, say, publishers. And right now, the majority of us aren't writing for publishers.
Yeah, as far as professors go, for the most part, they'll say, if you have the DOI on there, great, good job. If you don't, we understand they can be hard to find.
Mhm.
But if it's sitting there, like right there, if I go look at your source and it's sitting right there, I'm going to take points off of you not having it.
Okay.
But if you had to look through several different steps to find it,
They
because
usually forget
most
names.
classes are not research based,
It's just pretty much show me where your source came from. That way we know you didn't make it up.
And in APA, they do accessed or a retrieved by with the URL if you don't have a DOI.
Yeah, but if in Chicago, what I've seen is if you don't have the DOI, then you'll just leave it alone. You won't add anything extra. All right, and can we go to the next slide, please, ma'am? Awesome. All right, and then we have newspapers and magazines. If you retrieve a newspaper online, again, you'll have the access date and the whole URL.
Contact type.
Awesome, thank you. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing these?
We're going over Chicago Trading style right now. Okay. And then if you found it in a print copy, you won't have the URL or the access date. You'll just leave it with the date that it was sent out, and then end it with a period. And then, again, it's the same over here. And then with magazines, all you'll need is the author, the name of the article, what it came out in. If you get the online version, you'll do the access date and the URL as well. That's pretty much going to be the consistent thing. If it's in print, you'll just leave it with the date, and then if it's online, you'll also add accessed by and the URL. Okay, next one please, ma'am. All right, films are becoming more and more popular in academic papers, especially in my field, which is film studies. So I felt like they needed to be added. Because films, especially in MLA, can be really tricky. So in Chicago Turabian, you'll do the name of the film in italics, and then directed by, and then I'm not sure if you need every single one of like the directed by, the screenplay by, performed by.
That's how the manual has it, yeah.
Okay, cool. Then you'll add all the important information. When it says featuring, you want to only pick out about 1 to 3 actors, otherwise you're going to be listing an enormous cast. So pretty much pick out the leading roles that you have in there, followed by the studio and the date it was released. And if your DVD has a copyright of a later year, you'll add that as well in case there's additional information, or in case it's a special edition with new footage that wasn't seen in the original. And then,
Can I add something there?
yes.
There were 2 options then for space. I only included one. When you cite it in the bibliography, you can either do it, because they go alphabetically, you can do it alphabetically by the title of the film or by the director. And in that case, you would list the director's name before the title, last name, first name, and everything else would be the same.
All right, and then with the working in an anthology, it's really similar, again, to MLA, except for you'll actually write the word in, and in the book that it's in. So you'll have the author, the article, in the book that it's in, and then followed by the editor. If it doesn't have an editor, but it has a translator instead, you'll have that. If it has both, I've seen it where they add both. The editor first, followed by the translator. And then with the publishing company, the year, and then page number for your footnotes, and no page number for your bibliography. And that's how it is in everything. I forgot to mention that. Your page number will be in the footnote, it will not be in your bibliography. All right, and that concludes the Chicago Turabian presentation. Does anyone have any questions over that? No? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to MLA. Do you want to do it? Or? Okay, cool. But when it does get to film, I do have a copy.
Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna defer to you on film. I work with pretty much purely text sources. Alright, so Jonathan is passing out one of our MLA handouts. I'm guessing this is one of the ones that's been revised this semester. And on there's included just a little bit of how-to word stuff, because most of the MLA students that we get in are 1301 students with our first year English writing program, so setting up a paper and how to start that is a bit of a challenge. I don't believe we asked, what citation form are you most familiar with?
APA 6th edition. I'm one of the
Excellent.
professors. And I came because we just published a book, yay, and my errors were in citations, and it must have been the Chicago one. But anyway, I'll talk with you later. I'm so sorry. I'm really here for the 12 o'clock meeting, and I thought, I think I'll come in because the errors were citation.
Well, it's lovely to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. APA 6th edition.
All right, well, you didn't miss it. It's coming up next.
Yes.
All right, so we can do the same sort of thing with MLA.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly it's used in humanities, art somewhat, but they tend to go towards Turabian. Mostly it's English and languages. Same thing, Times New Roman, 12-point, double spaced. Weird thing with MLA is about the right hand top corner within the header, you're going to do your last name and the page number. So, no matter how many pages you drop, you're able to put them back in order. There's a 4-part heading at the top left hand for essays, and for research papers, there's a little bit of a different format, which I can look up if you'd like. And it uses the works cited at the very end of the paper on a separate page. And all double spaced throughout the entire paper, hanging indents on the citation, and indent each paragraph in the body of the paper. So let's go through some of the citations. What we did here is we showed what goes in each spot and then an example of each. So unlike Turabian, MLA uses in-text parenthetical citations more like APA does, and it's just the last name of the author and the page number as a general rule. And for the citation, you're gonna have the same sort of information in there as most other citation forms. It's always gonna be the author, the title, location of publication, that sort of thing. So, one author is pretty straightforward. 2 authors, you're gonna do the same thing as Turabian, where it's last name, first name, and then on the second author in the following, you do first name, last name. And yep, I got that. Do you have any questions on that? To the next one. Journal articles are much the same. You're going to put the title of the articles in quotations rather than italicizing the name like you would on the book. It just shows that it's a different format, and you do the same thing in the body of the text. Same sort of in-text citation. If you're doing it in print, you just put print at the end. If you're doing it online, you're going to put the database and when you accessed it. And there should be a web at the end of that.
I just want to clarify, in the second example there, that is as it would appear on the works cited page, right?
Yes.
And
this
yes,
is
you would
within
have
the
your
text.
indentation.
Which for MLA, if you start out a sentence saying, in Diana Hines's article, How to Write Literature in a Writing Center, yada yada yada, quotation, quotation, at the end of the sentence before the period, in your in-text citation, you're just going to put the page number because you already put the author earlier in the sentence.
Makes sense. Okay.
Which helps with readability. However, if you're saying, on the topic of writing in the Writing Center, you put the quote in the in-text citation, you're going to put both last name and page number. And your citation always goes at the end of the sentence before the period, regardless of how early in the sentence the quote was.
Okay.
So say you quoted 3 words at the beginning of the sentence and then commented on it. You'd still have it at the end after the commentary.
And just so all of you are aware, in every single one of these PowerPoints, the citations should be indented in a certain way, but PowerPoint was not having it.
That's what I wanted to.
Yeah, I heard that. Because I
We're
tried,
excited.
I highlighted them, I've been hanging, I tried Word was not a happy person.
This is what happens when I'm not in the office.
I know. I was trying to deal with Microsoft without Caitlin, and it just didn't work.
But yes, on
Oops, sorry.
the in-text, that's fine, I'm sorry, just making a comment on that. On the in-text, it's going to be within the body paragraph, and then on the citation page, your first line is going to be left flush, and then there's hanging indent. So this is online. Websites, MLA is a little funny about websites because most of the citation styles are trying to get us away from using websites because, as Bailey said, the internet apparently is the devil. But they do have a way of citing it, which it looks like. Good job, you changed it.
This morning.
So you have the same sort of thing. If it's a corporate author, say it's a government website, you would say U.S. government as the author. If not, you just use, if the author's not available, say if it's a unnamed blog post, you just start with the title and that's how you're going to alphabetize it at the end. Usually the year is a little hard to find on websites. In that case, usually I go with the copyright year or the update year. And on medium of publication, here you're going to put web in the same, that you're going to do that same thing in the databases. At the end you'll put web before the access date. Do you want to go over video?
YouTube videos are along the same lines. If there's no author's name, then instead, again, you'll put their screen name, which will probably be easier to find in most cases, especially if you're doing YouTube videos, because everyone does it by a screen name. And then you'll do the video in quotation marks, and then the media type. So this, in YouTube, you're always going to have online video clips because that's all the site really has, followed by the site that you got it on, and then the date web, and then the date you found it.
So newspapers and magazines are pretty much, nice thing about MLA is it's relatively consistent regardless of source. You're always going to have that author page number, you're going to need the same information, and it's going to be in roughly the same order. You're going to do the author, the title, and the type of source, and then you're going to have location and medium, or rather title of the source. So it's the same sort of thing. Difference here would be the city and state on the newspaper, but that's not too difficult to find.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes, please.
With the manual, if you have something that's like the Dallas Morning News, people can pretty much figure out that it's from Dallas, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And so you won't need to put the city or state, but since we have one here that just says the Post and Courier, we probably have no idea where that's from, and that's when you'll include the city and state. But if it was something where you could obviously read it and figure out where it was from, then you'll be okay with not including those.
Yeah, MLA allows for a lot of assumed information that you don't have to actually add in. Another comment that I meant to make on the books is a weird little rule with MLA is if, say your page number range is from 107 to 110. Instead of putting 107 to 110, you put 107 through 10, because that first number is assumed. And regardless of how I did it.
Okay, and what if you have a second and a third use of that text, but in a totally different other part of the book?
It depends on how you're citing it, because if you're citing it as a quote, you're not going to have that wide of a range. You might have two numbers or like 2 pages. The 107 to 10 would be more for in your works cited citation. So if it's an anthology, you might have different works from the anthology and you cite those separately. But if it's all in the same source, you just, and then in your in-text citation, say you'd have one from 108 and one from 109. But your end, really the big time you're going to use those page numbers is in anthologies and chapters of books and that sort of thing.
All right. There's 2 different ways to cite films when it comes to MLA, depending on what you're trying to focus on. If you're focusing on the film itself and the material that it has, then you're going to start with the title of the film and move on to the director and the performers. And again, you'll only list about 1 through 3. followed by the production company, the year, and the medium of the work. And unlike Chicago Turabian, MLA is okay if you just leave it with the year that it's being, or that it was released, unless you use that additional material that came out with the newer releases, and then you'll add that information in as well. But if you are focusing on something the director specifically does, like if you're noticing key patterns in his work, or if it's something that he specifically said or did for this production, then you'll list the director first, followed by a comma and then DIR, and then the film and the production company. So you'll just switch them and you won't need to include the actors in that one. And then depending on how you choose to cite that, depends on whether you'll do the film or the director in your parenthetical citation. So if you choose to do the film, you'll put the film there. If you choose to focus on the director, you'll put the director's name there instead.
And anthologies are probably the most common source that we get in the center, because most of the students are working out of anthology for their class, usually groups of essays. So it's the same sort of thing, and on all of these, if you have multiple authors, you can do that same multiple author as the book, where it's last name, first name, then first name, last name, first name, last name. And in this case, it's going to be italicized, and you're going to work with an editor or a translator, and it's ED or TRANS period, and put those in, but those are always first name, last name. You don't have to worry about flipping the names around. And in this case, you have 24 to 34, but say it was 124 to 134, you would just add the one here and leave it off there. And if this were, say, an ebook, instead of print, you would put web and then say, put the access date. We don't use URLs in
MLA doesn't.
MLA.
MLA has dropped URLs.
Wow.
All you need to put is pretty much where you found it. Again, it's assumed that if you need to find it, you'll be
You can
able
find
to.
it again.
And
So no DOIs?
No DOIs, no URLs.
I love MLA.
Because you're citing the source rather than where you found it necessarily. So you're more focused on everything you can know about the source than you are about finding it again. We read it once we got it.
And in addition to the anthology, the page numbers on the citation on your works cited page, it will be the entire story or essay from the anthology that you'll cite. It won't just be what pages you used in that story or essay. So if the story goes from 24 to 34, but you only use, say, 30 to 34, you'll still need to list the whole thing.
And that includes any kind of endnotes that they have. Say they have, reading questions or whatever. You'll include those with the story.
That's it.
And that's it. Do you have any questions on MLA? All right. Do you want to do APA? This is John.
Hi there.
I'll let you PowerPoint.
You guys said you're most familiar with the APA format? Okay.
3 of us.
Okay, so, well, and you said you're the director.
I don't use APA format very often, but I'd like to know more about it. Okay, you're welcome.
It's just one.
Well, APA, I think it's actually like MLA in its own sense. While we don't have the writer's, author's name, professor's name, class name, and date like MLA does in the top left corner, we just include a title page. And I guess what's unique about that is the header that we use. Use a header with a page number in all caps, like a brief version of the title. But in APA format, the title page includes a unique header in that it says running head on it. So often in the center we get like new business students who don't understand how to differentiate from the first page to the second page. So literally just telling them to click that different first page checkbox will make all the world of difference to the confusion. But it's in MLA and it's times 0 and 12 point font, double spaced, on the center, on the cover page, not necessarily centering your name, title of work, and place of publication or where you're writing it. For example, the university is kind of like 2/3 the way up. But that's the basic format of APA. And so if you wanted to move on to,
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I actually thought with APA it was Times New Roman and Arial that were accepted fonts.
I think Arial is accepted, but Times New Roman is preferred.
Okay.
In my experience. I mean, then again, I'm writing for professors mostly, so it's basically kind of what they want.
Okay.
Okay, so books with one author, multiple authors here. Similar to MLA, you do last name, then first name, except for we do an abbreviation of the first name. And some that might be a letter, and it also might include the middle initial as well. I feel like I'm kind of saying the same thing as MLA, but another difference is while you do just do the first letter of the first name and middle initial if it's there, when you have a work with multiple authors, you continue with the last name and the first initial of the first name and middle name if it's there. You don't necessarily do first name and last name in that sequence.
And a comment on the in-text citation, if you're talking about Gallagher's article, after you say Gallagher, you're going to put 2009, like in your actual essay. So you're going to say Gallagher, 2009, wrote about yada, 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 and then at the end.
So you don't wait, like MLA, you put that the page number at the end with parentheses, excuse me. Within the middle of a sentence, as soon as you drop that author's name, you have the
You
year.
have the year, but you save the page number at the end.
I think there's a little more creativity than that.
Really?
You can do the author and then include the year and page number at the end of the sentence if you want.
Okay.
But it is cleaner, as she suggested, that you do the year in parentheses right after the author's last name.
Okay.
Especially if you have, say, the same author or two authors with the same name, but you have works from different years. That way it's understood instantly, you know, oh, this is from the 2009 study, this is from the 2011 study. That way it doesn't get mixed up.
And if it's from, I mean, this is talking about books here, but in general, in text citations, if there's no single author provided, you do the group name. If it's provided by a database, like for example, we had a student bring in a nurses association thing, and you cite the association group name as opposed to the author that was not listed.
And another notable thing on APA that stays pretty much through all the citations is that in the title of the work, only the first letter is capitalized, and then the rest of it's all lowercase.
Unless you have a subtitle and the first letter of the subtitle is also capitalized.
Okay. So journal articles, we do use DOI or URL in databases from online. And in my experience, as Caitlin mentioned earlier, the DOIs are in the PDF format of the article that you might be using. Then again, like Bailey said, it also is way easier to find it in a print version where you can just plug in the title of the article, the periodical number, volume number, and that following information. But it doesn't range. I think APA is really consistent in that the way you format the author is very much the same, the title of the article, as far as the capitalization, italicizing the journal, or publication for that matter in books. But the difference just being if it's from online, you include a URL retrieved from or the DOI.
I just wanted to say, do you mind going back? So on the Scruton one, is it still consistent? Because I hear this, not a lot of people I know this, but for those that are like APA Nazis, this is something that's hard and true. So it says the new criterion, comma, 15 open parentheses, 3 close parentheses, comma. I hear that the comma after the close parentheses has to be italicized.
How do you tell?
Exactly. Well, what I'm saying is that whenever I write it out, I have to take extra effort to highlight that last comma just to italicize it, and I think it's kind of...
So it's supposed to be italicized along with
Talk about this one right here.
Yes.
along with the journal.
So
journal.
I was taught that that's supposed to be italicized, but not very many people know that that's the correct way.
That's interesting because in Turabian, it shouldn't be. Like if you have a title of the book, the period after that cannot be italicized or it's wrong.
Yeah.
So,
But again, how do you tell if the period is italicized? You know,
Well,
it's
I
Looking in
think
the-
I can tell that comma is not italicized after
Yeah.
the 3.
Looking
But I
at
have
the
to look
manual,
really,
it does
really,
not
really
look
hard.
italicized to me.
And
Actually,
It's
these
in a
two
weird
commas,
form.
I
But see,
think
that
this
was-
one is italicized.
I'm
Yeah,
familiar
that's
with
It's
the
not.
fifth version, I don't know about the sixth, that's why I'm asking.
Well,
Yeah, this, I mean, I'm gonna bring this over here, or Bailey will bring that over. It does not look italicized to me, but it's in a weird font, so
so
it's a little
it
difficult
might
to
be
tell.
italicized.
It looks like the
Looking
first
at
one
it.
is more,
This one looks more slanty, and
Yeah.
that one looks more
Yeah,
down.
I think that first one is.
I've heard that
It would have to
the,
be an APA Nazi to really ding you for that.
This
Maybe,
one-
maybe a
this one
publisher
looks the same.
wouldn't care.
Yeah.
See, it's a difficult font to really tell.
Yeah.
Is it Times New Roman?
Let me look
It's
at it.
not.
it's not.
Oh, that's
We do
MLA
not.
though, or no, is
This is APA.
Okay, but we do not include the number. For our dissertation, and it's so different in every department. And I just really hate that about APA, to put the number there along with the author and the year and the number. We only put page numbers if it's an exact quote. And we tell our doctoral students that this is not APA, but we know that the citation is so that you can find the information. It is. But it's also to make the reading clearer as well. And to say what you are saying. Are you paraphrasing this text, or is it the exact quotation? So that's one of the things that we look at. We say the first comma, but not the second one. Where is
Yeah,
that?
I've seen people get knocked
we're
for
looking
that
here.
volume.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Number not
It's
being
not.
italicized.
It's the first one that's
But
attached,
So you
never-
mean like
not
the
the
number
second.
3?
Okay.
According to
15.
this,
Okay.
Oh.
yeah, it's very clear, and I
Okay.
don't do the same.
I'm sorry, what is it?
And
you.
along with the page numbers,
Yes.
when I first
The three
came
is
in
the
the writing
issue
center,
number.
page
Okay,
numbers
thank you,
weren't
thank
a big thing
Sorry,
to
I
put in with
was like, what's the
APA.
word?
But as the years have gone
I
by,
should-
It has
Page-
been.
page numbers have gotten more, they've been requested more and more by
But that's an
professors.
interesting point.
So I'm not sure if it's
In
true
In the
for
education,
academia or
in the education, it's our academics. If it's the exact words, we want that page number. If it's paraphrased, put the author and the year. You don't have to put the page number. But I'm gonna go look for it anyway, because I'm really sure
They don't necessarily
paraphrase.
follow
Well, you
the
know
number.
about
And
like
you know how the plagiarism that's connected with poor paraphrasing. And we don't do that. You gotta understand writing in order to
Come on
write.
in.
Roger, are you in psychology?
No, I'm in the in the ed leadership. Oh, okay. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. Because each is different.
Well, see, my mom
Each
is actually
department
Yeah,
is
yeah,
different. I'm
actually, I
so
think I do know
glad,
that.
that's why I
But it's
said,
supposed to-
in our ed leadership, in our dissertation member, is
Isn't
completely.
it the?
Well, my mother is actually in the curriculum and instruction doctoral program here right now,
Yes.
and she'll have me look over her stuff, and I'll be like, I'm not sure if this is right. She's like, well, that's what we all do.
That's what we do, theirs is different, but we
So-
are going more and more with that.
So like New York City.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming a trend now.
It is.
I think, let's go ahead and finish up with APA, and then if you have any specific questions, you know, we can talk about it.
Alright, so websites and videos. They kind of similar as before. Authors, exactly the same. Date of publication, title of the document, and then retrieve from. So websites are kind of similar to journals as instead of, you just don't have the journal database. But you do include the URL, but here it's specific and it says retrieve from, as opposed to just the DOI number or URL. And as Caitlin said earlier with MLA style, or Bailey did, with videos, as far as YouTube being a source these days, pretty commonly, the screen name is appropriate to include in there with the author. So, for example, on Vimeo.com, if you have a filmmaker, you include their name. But if they had a specific like pen name that they use, you can also include that right here in brackets. And that's similar with the title of video and video file. And just again, like websites, you would also use retrieve from and include the URL.
I'm sorry, can I look at that real quick? Actually, it's probably in here.
And like I mentioned earlier, well, this kind of goes without saying, but with websites, there's no particular author. If there's a particular author, you just type the website name and year. Obviously, there would be no page number on a website. And same with video as well.
Thanks.
Newspapers and magazines are really similar to each other. And they're pretty straightforward, including the author's name, when they were published, the title of the article, the newspaper specifically, or magazine. In the magazine's case, you'd include the issue number as well and the page that you use. And one thing I've seen in newspapers is, since their pages work with like 1A or 2A or 3A, depending on that, since we mostly work with students and we're writing for teachers really, some of them will prefer that you use the 2A like a newspaper style would, but others will just ask you to drop the letter behind it and just use the page number. Okay, and then another very common thing in the Writing Center is works in anthology. We work with problem posing a lot with the freshman students, and they have the hardest time figuring out, why do I have to cite the article and the book as well? It doesn't make any sense. But you just have to explain to them what's important about it, how it's two different authors for the book itself being an edited source and the article itself. So differentiating that. But you would set the book itself as an anthology and then the articles inside a little differently. But films, I honestly never received a student in the center with APA working with films. Personally, but it seems
It's
like
official for film students all on here.
yeah.
So, with this, you're going to do it a little bit differently. Like in the MLA, you chose which was the most important aspect that you were focusing on, and you cited it accordingly. Here, you're going to start with the producer and the director, and then move on to all the other information that you'll normally see in a source. However, the difference is in the parenthetical citation, you'll have the name of the film followed by the year, in case you do multiple films by the same director. In APA, they really don't want you to confuse any names and your citations. They want to make sure that everything is easily matched up. So we'll do the name of the film instead of the producer or director. If you guys, hopefully we'll have these up on our website and stuff soon, so that way in case you want to go over any of the slides that we showed you today, you'll be able to get them. Also, if you guys have any more questions, we are open for those as well.
Thank you. All right.
Do you have any questions?
No, I do not. Excellent.